Hello, everyone. Welcome to Top of the Hour Topic, Creating a Winning Abstract. This is sponsored by your research committee, and today's program is from three of your colleagues presenting pearls just in time for submission for your abstract to the National Committee. This is Michelle Mosia. I'm your moderator for this evening. This will be a 20-minute presentation followed by questions and answers. So let's go ahead and get started. And our first speaker is going to be Dr. Joanne Miller, speaking about creating a winning abstract.
So why should you start an abstract? And this is going to be very timely with our conference coming up here. Did you ever think you would had a project that you wanted to share with people, or ever thought that this project would make a great poster? Were you ever at a conference looking around and thought that I could do this? This is something that I would like to do for next year. When you're thinking these thoughts, now's the time to follow through and submit an abstract. Sharing ideas and innovations improves quality of care and education, and it's also an expected part of our professional role. So consider, if you've thought about it but didn't do it before, why did you not submit an abstract? The most common reason is the fear of not being able to do it or just not knowing where to start. So this webinar will offer some practical hints on writing an abstract. We strongly encourage you to submit an abstract for the GAPNA National Conference. Its due date is usually in mid-March, and specific information is always on the GAPNA website. So next slide. For example, what is an abstract? So when we're talking about research and projects, research and evidence-based projects should enrich the advanced practice nurses' knowledge and enhance the care of older adults or other populations. Educational research or projects should contribute information about improving teaching methodologies, outcomes for professionals, students, or patients. And clinical experiences and case studies can share unique or little known information to increase awareness or demonstrate the need for a future study. It's important to make sure, no matter which one you choose, is that your study or project meets the abstract criteria. This can save you a lot of unnecessary work and disappointment. Know what types of abstracts are being requested by the conference. The context of the abstract must match the call for abstracts focus or instructions. Is your study research or evidence-based project or quality improvement project? Is it appropriate for this conference? Again, does it meet the criteria? Is the request for completed research, or is research in progress okay? Is the call for student research? Do you have a project or study in progress, near completion, or completed? It's important to have the project completed or at least know the results prior to submitting an abstract. I know sometimes in your excitement, you consider wanting to share your ideas with your colleagues, so you can kind of jump the gun. Writing an abstract before your project is finished or running and not complete can make things very difficult if you do get accepted. So who are you writing this for this abstract? This is going to be this is who your audience is. You must assume your audience is someone who does not know the information that you're sharing. Tailor the abstract to the audience, and one size does not fit all. If you're submitting it for a meeting or conference, be sure you understand its theme or focus and have your abstract fit that theme. For example, if the meeting's focused on policy issues and you submit an abstract that highlights a clinical issue without relating it to policy, your abstract is not likely to get selected. Identify your main message and do this ahead of time, and then determine if it fits the call for the abstract description. Also consider if you fit the purpose of that organization. Do your homework. Look at abstracts from a prior year of the specific conference you're interested in. Look, what are some common themes of the accepted papers or presentations? Carefully read the criteria for writing the abstract. And you will hear this theme constantly in this presentation, and follow these instructions. If the organization is requesting an online submission process, you have to use it. Writing an abstract and then submitting it by email will not be accepted. If there is a word or character limit, you must follow that guideline. If there are certain sections that are addressed and they're requesting to be in the abstract, you have to do that. It's common that the review or judging process for the abstract does follow the same format as the abstract guidelines or criteria. So, but if those are posted on the call for abstracts, pay attention to both of them. If you do not address a particular section, you could lose those points when they review your abstract. Now, Dr. Sharon Wexel will discuss getting started.
Okay, thank you. So getting started. The first piece of advice, my first pearl, is start early. It takes longer than you think. Sometimes you get fooled when you look and see, oh, 350 words, no problem, piece of cake. Sometimes it's harder to write less than it is to write more. So start earlier. As Dr. Miller said, follow the instructions. Tailor the abstract to the audience. First thing you need to start with is the title. The title should be catchy. If your title is not interesting, if it's boring, chances are some of the reviewers might not read beyond that. Clearly communicate what your project is about. Match your title to what the content of the abstract is about. If your title says one thing and your abstract is about something entirely, the reviewers might get a little upset about that and score your abstract low. Remember to write in an active voice. Next thing you address after you find a wonderful title is the background. I like to think of the background is so what? Why should the reader care about the problem and results? The so what needs to be compelling. Yes, you are very enmeshed in your project. You really understand why it's important, why someone should care. You need to share that. Not everyone will have that same background that you do. When you're writing your background, you lead with your main message. It has to catch the reader, the reviewer at that point. Next piece is rationale. Why did you do this project? The answer to that is not that this was a school assignment. Your rationale needs to be more than that. And a good way of providing that rationale is to provide a brief review of the literature and or a theoretical framework to support your study. Brief review of the literature. Remember, 350 words is not a lot. So when you're addressing the review of the literature, you want to address the most important sources and get your biggest bang for your buck. Next, you have your problem statement. So you went with why it was important, why you did the project, and now you're down to what problem are you trying to solve? What theoretical, scientific, or practical gap is this information filling? Next slide. Now you come down to your objectives and purpose. I like to think the objectives and purpose, if you look at how you're proceeding, you've gone from very broad, now you're starting to narrow it down. What was the purpose of your study? What did you hope to accomplish? Now you go, next you address research questions and or hypotheses. Again, we're going from broad and we're narrowing down even more. What was your specific research question? Did you have any hypotheses? In plain language, a hypothesis is an educated guess. It's what you as the researcher or the person doing the project expected to happen. And your hypotheses are based on your review of the literature. You don't have to have a hypothesis. You could just have a research question. But if you have a specific hypothesis, it's best to put it in. Now, the methodology, that's the meat and potatoes of your abstract. It's the who, what, when, and where. What did you do? How did you do it? Who were your subjects? Where did you do it? What was your setting? How did you collect your data? What tools did you use? How did you analyze your data? When I write my methodology, I very often do it as bullet points. And I then take the bullet points, and very often I have to reorder them. And then I read it and say, did I miss anything? And once I have them in the correct order in bullet points, I then put them together in sentences. Someone reading your methodology theoretically should be able to go and replicate your study. Last part are your results and conclusions. In your results, include specific results. If you used a specific tool, for example, to measure functional status, report the results of that specific instrument. Your results should address the aims, the research questions, and hypotheses. You need to close the loop. Conclusions and implications. What do your results mean? What is the impact on practice? What future research recommendations do you have? And with your recommendations, I like to think about what should be done based on your results. What should I, as the reader, reading the results of your study in your abstract, what should I do with those? How is that going to change practice? Okay, and now Dr. Mitchell is going to offer you some hints for success.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wexler. So Dr. Wexler gave you wonderful advice about how to think about your research. So now we're going to talk about, it's all about the presentation, creating your best effort. So as Dr. Miller had mentioned, one method you could do here is to review some well-written abstracts accepted from previous submissions. So perhaps a method you could employ would be to go to the GAPNA website and look at past posters. That might give you an idea. Refrain from cutting and pasting from other personal documents. Now, you certainly can use information that you've used before, but what I mean by this is when you're going to do that background information and you have this fantastic review of the literature you did, and you cut a little bit here and you cut from another document, and that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like it's cut and pasted. It doesn't have a nice flow. So if you're going to do that, make sure that you then create a sense of consistency for how it sounds. You want to limit the use of abbreviations and acronyms. Of course, there are times you may need to do that. So if you're going to talk about GAPNA, you would say Gerontological Advanced Practice Nurses Association, parentheses, capital GAPNA, end of parentheses. And then you could use GAPNA as your noun moving forward. Avoid jargon and long sentences. We use so much jargon in healthcare, sometimes we don't even recognize it, but just read through. If you're going to talk about a clinical nurse specialist, then you say clinical nurse specialist, not clin specs. And long sentences, well, if you see conjunction after conjunction and, semicolon, and, that's a long sentence. So we don't want to see that. We want active voice in crisp sentences. And then after we're getting through that first sense of creating our best effort, we're going to critique the details. So keep focused on the main message. Use word count and reading level tools, these methods that we have in Word. And your reading level tool, you'd want it at a 12th grade level or so. We want to make sure you're using some sophisticated language and in terms of your verbs. Review for consistent verb tense. So often people talk about their research in the past, but then they'll talk about their findings in the same sentence, or they'll use that conjunction and they'll talk about the findings in the present. So just be consistent throughout. Spell and grammar check. So again, use your tools that are in Microsoft Word or whatever, or Grammarly, or whatever method you use, but make sure you do that grammar check and spell check. And avoid tables, charts, and citation unless crucial. Sometimes you might be doing an abstract where someone might ask for some references and you might need to put in some citations. But again, there's a strict word count. So usually not enough words to write all that information. And then moving on to applying those final touches. So now you think it's in great shape, but take the time to have a colleague review your abstract and really give your colleague an opportunity to review the abstract. Don't just say, here at lunchtime, can you eyeball this for me? And expect that they can give you some really nice detailed information. And when they do give you that detailed information, take the time to integrate the comments and edit accordingly and have a discussion. Why did they think that sounded too wordy? Was that redundant? Did I actually say that twice already? So look at that and garner their opinion and how you can make that really tight. Again, verify that the font is consistent throughout the document. And as we've been saying, read the directions. Most times there's a specific font and point size that an abstract would want. Read your abstract out slowly twice. So we mentioned about doing the spell check and the grammar check, but spell check is not going to pick up. My most common issue here is I often want to use the word from, and instead I have typed in the word form. Spell check's not going to pick that up, but once I read it out slowly, I will find that. So you want to read out slowly and just really make sure that it flows. You want to submit and feel confident about the quality of your product. Like you really put time in, just like Dr. Wexler said, these take time. Submit your final abstract with 2 days to spare, because often if you needed to go in and make a little tweak, you usually are able to do that up until the very absolute deadline time. And you want to be proud when your abstract is accepted. So feeling good about everything. So now Dr. Michelle Messia is going to talk to you about specifically submitting an abstract for GAPNA. And then Dr. Messia just needs a second. She's going to take herself off mute, and then we're going to talk to you about that. So the information we've given you really can apply for any abstract, but now we're going to be more specific to GAPNA. Dr. Messia?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mitchell, and thank you for reminding me to get myself off of mute. So this is where you go to the GAPNA website, and there will be a call for poster and podium abstracts. And then you can see that there's an opportunity for you to submit your poster and podium abstracts by following that link. But first, before you do that, it's really important, as you've heard our speakers say, that you want to view the submission guidelines for more information. So for more information, you'll see a nice detailed submission guidelines. As you can see right here, this is just a snippet that tells you about your abstract. It's limited to 350 words. That's excluding the title though. And then there's the submission deadlines. And as we heard earlier, it's usually around mid-March. You do want to give yourself a couple of days to spare. And if you have any questions, you can submit those to the person that is on the link. And the last thing is once you're ready to submit, you're going to go to the GAPNA Conference Administration and you're going to log in. If you do not have an account at this time, you will make an account to log in. And that just a hint here that if you start putting your submission in and you want to take a pause, it's okay. You can come back. But once that deadline is gone, you won't be able to submit. So now we're going to take the time and we'd like to have you chat in some questions so that we can respond. So I'll give it a moment or two. I see something coming in right now. Okay, thank you. The first question is, the call for abstracts has a word limit. I have a lot to say about my project. How do you suggest I cut it down? Dr. Wexler, would you like to take that question?
Thank you. Yes, great question. As I said when in my portion of the presentation, word count is really important. I use two different tactics. I like to talk a lot and I like to write a lot. So I encounter that problem very frequently. I start out by putting down everything that I could possibly want to write. I find it easier to cut than to add. Once I have everything down, I read it. As Dr. Mitchell said, I like to read it out loud because when you hear how it sounds, often you know exactly what you can cut. The next thing that I do is I will give it to a colleague, obviously giving him or her enough time, and ask them to go through and do the cuts for me. And then I take another look at it. Please know that the word limit is absolute. You might look at it and say, well, 350 words. Are they going to know if there's 390? Well, A, yes, they will. And B, most abstract submission systems will cut off after you hit the required number of words. So you can be typing away and it will submit the first 350 words.
Great advice, Dr. Wexler. We have another question here, and I'd like to know, Dr. Miller, if you'd like to take this one. There is multiple authors, and how do I list all those authors? What advice can you give me?
Well, my first piece of advice is always, since you're the submitting author, that your name should go first with your credentials on that. So that's the easy one. If you are a student, probably the second name should be your advisor or your chairperson. After that, you've got some choices. You can list people alphabetically, or probably the more common one is to list them in the degree of their contributions to your research or your project. So those are kind of the guidelines, not to overwhelm your abstract with too many authors. So a guideline is, maybe 4 authors at the most. If you will have other people that you want to acknowledge, when you do get accepted on your poster, there's a box that you can add in for acknowledgements, and you can list multiple other people of your statistician or maybe site preceptor, whatever might be appropriate at that time. But you don't need to put everyone on the abstract title or form.
Great. Okay, and we have another question here. What do you think about recycling a previously presented abstract? Is that okay to do?
I'll take that. So no, it's not okay to do. If it's already been presented, then it's not appropriate. I mean, you just can't, go shop your poster from one conference to another and think it's going to be a different audience, because often it's some of the same folks. So, and just ethically, no, that's not acceptable. You have to think about it in the same way that you would think about a manuscript. You can't shop your manuscript to several journals at the same time. I will caution you, though, there's a possibility if you're addressing a different aspect of the project, it might be. Always go back and read the instructions. You might get some guidance from the abstract submission information, but I'll present an example that I had. So I had a study where I looked at older adults and physical activity in neighborhoods, in the built environment of neighborhoods. So I had a poster where I presented my aims and my findings and how I looked at that from a clinical viewpoint. But then there was another conference that was really focused on, their theme was taking findings and how do you think about it in terms of policy. So I used the same question, but all my information and my methods and what I wanted to present about was all focused on the policy implications of my study. So, there's a possibility you can certainly look at different angles of your sample and your initial purpose, but everything else really needs to be a fresh look. So that would be my advice.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Dr. Wexler, I have a project that is in progress, almost done. It will be done by the time the conference comes around. Can I write an abstract based on an anticipated result?
I think that's treading on dangerous ground. First of all, I would refer you back to the call for abstracts. That will give you guidance on whether you can submit a project that's in process. Sometimes the organization will allow you to do that for a poster, but you need to check. The downside of anticipated results is your results may not come out exactly like you planned them to. So be very careful. It is best to wait till your project is completed. And the good news is that GAPNA has a conference every year. So if you don't have an opportunity, your project isn't done this year, then you will be, hopefully your project will be done and ready for next year's session.
Okay.
Oh,
Well,
Michelle-
everyone,
Michelle,
this, yes.
I just saw one more question in the chat.
Oh,
And somebody
great.
was asking about what did we mean, what is meant on that criteria that I saw in GAPNA about de-identifying information in an abstract. And when I have reviewed abstracts before for various organizations, organizations take that very seriously. And what that means is your review of an abstract is anonymous, so they do not get your name attached to your abstract, but they also don't want the institution you did your research or project at added into that or another name. So be very careful when you are writing that abstract that it's de-identified. And the instructions do say that, and you will lose points if you do that.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Does any of our other speakers have any contributions before we say to everyone that this concludes our program? Okay, so we'd really like to thank everybody that joined us. This concludes our top of the hour topic, creating a winning abstract. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Here.